Welcome to the Local Marketing Source Weekly Update, brought to you by localmarketingsource.com.
This week's Local Marketing Update is brought to you by Scott Gallagher. Scott is the co-founder of Local Marketing Source and has become the recognized expert in providing online marketing services to local businesses. Follow Scott on Twitter at ScottGallagher5 and on Facebook.com/ScottPGallagher.
Hey, well, good afternoon, everyone. Scott Gallagher here with Local Marketing Source, bringing you our weekly local marketing industry update. Now, next week's LMS call is going to be Wednesday, July 10th at 4 p.m. Eastern, and the LMS membership provides access to our private Facebook group, live questions, and of course our private portal. Now this week we've got a few different things to give you for our update. I'll just quickly go over those, tell you what we're going to talk about for the tips, and as well as in the Facebook group. For the weekly update, the SEO community has put together and started to build a compilation of well over 300 keywords that are triggering the local carousel that's coming up, and I'll talk a little bit about that. We also have a new element. This is something I've been talking about for 2 or 3 years now on the social side for SEO, and how big it is and how big this is an element for ranking on the mobile side of local searches. We're going to talk a little bit more about the rel equals authorship aspects and how Google is now showing results without the authorship tag on HTML, and as well as an update on the Google keyword tool that's no longer going to exist. And finally, some data that when it comes down to local sales, social media versus email marketing is still hands down crushing the conversion rate in terms of direct marketing efforts through social media or email marketing. Now, for our weekly local business tip, last week I talked about making your content easily shared. Prior week we talked about is sharing your content easily. Well, you'll have to go back to the 2 previous week's updates to get the understanding of that. But this week, I'm going to shift gears a little bit and get back to some old school. It still blows me away how many people are still trying to market their websites on the search engines through SEO, through a lot of old school strategies. And so I'm going to talk about 7 different link building strategies that you should completely, unequivocally avoid. Now, when we get into the discussion of a local internet marketing agency, last week I talked about all the technology behind making your content easily shared. And this week, for an agency tip, we're going to talk about the 5 steps for optimizing your LinkedIn company page. Okay, well, now in the LMS member Facebook group, we'd like to announce a couple of new members, and why don't you guys get in there and say hi to some of these new members. We've got some members from all around the globe. It's great. Our newest member has come from Mexico. We've got members over in Australia, Austria, Canada, the United Kingdom, even France. It's fantastic, and so the LMS community is starting to grow even larger. It's great. Now, for our weekly business tip, I was going to say 7 things you should never do in link building. How many people tend to do this? It's not about the number of links that you have. Don't go out looking for links. It's that simple. We're looking for quality of links. It's that, regardless of what you've got coming to your website. I can't say that enough. So when we start to talk about number 2, mass article submission. You're going to submit your article to 100 different sites, the same article. That's going to give you 100 different links back to your website. That's not going to give you any value. And the other thing is this gets into the issue of duplicate content. One thing that's misunderstood about duplicate content, if you do that, it's not going to hurt you. You're just not going to get value from it. And having the same piece of content in 2 different pieces on the internet is not going to hurt the original source. Duplicate content's not going to hurt you. just not going to help you in most cases. Content spinning, of course, that's taking an article, changing a few words in it, and calling it unique content. Well, that's plagiarism back in the days of school. That's what we used to call it. When you copy somebody else and you change a few pieces of content in it, that's plagiarizing somebody else's work. Even if you're plagiarizing your own work, why should you be getting additional value for it? And speaking of content and getting this mass distribution, one thing we don't do very often is build out the content on our own sites. One thing that Google looks for and thinks is very, very important is how much content is on a website, how often it's being updated, how often is new content being put on it. So don't forget to consider your own websites out there and don't ignore them. And then far too often do we obsess over the anchor text and the keyword density and all of these other metrics within a website. Even keyword research is something that's far too misunderstood. The fact of the matter is keyword research is just trying to determine what are the most relevant words that people ultimately are using. We've got to trust the search engines that they're trying to figure out the best ways and understand what people ultimately are searching for. And so when we're writing text or content or writing anything on a website or a blog post and we're trying to focus on a specific keyword or a specific key phrase, we're completely missing the point of the content of the article or the context of the article that we're originally trying to create. The fact of the matter is if you're a dentist and you're creating an article around dentistry of any sort, whether it be teeth whitening or crowns, the content that's going to be included in there is going to include your top converting keywords or key phrases, i.e. your core term being dentist or dentistry or any form of that core term. And then of course your modifier, whether you have your core modifier or your geo modifier. Geo modifier is going to be your location, and typically your location is your town or your zip codes, and we hope that you've got this content placed on different pieces on the page. And then a core modifier may be, if your core term is dentistry, then a modifier may be whitening, teeth whitening. And then that would be the specifics of that article in the first place. So don't forget about some of your don't be so focused on anchor text. Guest posting. Far too often people are out there trying to create content and getting it on other people's articles. Well, that's something, or other people's blogs. That's something that's relevant if you've got a relationship with the individual. You're going to waste your time and spin your tires and only get exposure on non-authoritative, non-relevant blogs when you are randomly sending out email messages to people saying, I want to get some content on here. This is something that I'll do 2 or 3 times a year, and that's it. It's not something that we even have strategies for our clients. It's not necessary in the local community. But having a good relationship with a blogger and then asking them over the telephone after you've built that relationship is much different than sending out mass emails. And then finally, we say that content is king, but it's not the quantity of content again. It's the quality of it. Are people actually going to read this article? If you're writing content for a chiropractor or a courier service or an attorney, are that attorney that specific? Is their specific attorney's prospective clients interested in that article? Would they read it? Would you publish it and put it onto an email for them that's an email blast? That's the type of content and quality that should be sought out when creating content, regardless of where it's being exposed. Ideally, local places like the Chamber of Commerce and whatnot. So, when creating content for your local business or your client's local business, keep all of those things in mind and be careful with your link building strategy. Now, weekly update. As mentioned, there is a list of over 300 trigger keywords that's now being built on the internet. Just do a search on Google for a local carousel keyword list. You'll find the list. it's not really worthy too much to get into great discussions. We're still in the beginning stages of this local carousel. So it's... just give me 1 second here. Yeah, okay. Being in the beginning stages, a lot of things are going to change. The algorithm's still being tweaked. You know, items like a gluten-free product store obviously are not triggering the local results, but other items like, you know, piano tuning aren't as well. But keywords like gas station, and definitely in the restaurant business and grocery stores and whatnot are triggering the local carousel. Okay, I'd mentioned that, at least in the SEO community, this is something I've been talking about for a few years now. But it's now a big factor being discussed in the SEO community as a very relevant ranking factor for local businesses on mobile devices. And that factor is engagement. So we can only speculate in a lot of different ways how engagement is being measured, but there's a few things that we know. On Google, Google only has access to certain social network data, primarily Google+. Therefore, engagement within Google+ is important. Elements of engagement are fairly easy to determine. You know, whether we want to look at fake profiles versus real profiles. It's not just an element of having people within your circle, it's people within your circle that have active profiles that are constantly sharing information, sharing a wide, broad range of information. Just think organically of real people. At the end of the day, I'm a firm believer that the only strategy is the organic way, and that's to get real followers. And in turn, for local businesses to really entice that engagement, we can look at using QR codes in the offline world when customers are within there. That would be engagement with utilizing the customer review acquisition system, ensuring maybe that there's postcards in these local businesses, that they're being linked to the Google Plus page. As well within the social network, all content that is created within your business is shared within there. You make your content easily shareable. We talked about that last week and how to have these buttons and on your different pieces of content and what buttons are particularly relevant. We've also talked about optimizing your Local Plus page that's on there and integrating your Google Places account into Google Plus Local. How that transition has completely gone through, and now with this local carousel that's being introduced. So definitely ensure that your profile's got all the best practices on it. You're utilizing and maximizing the use of all multimedia, including video. You've got your website, and you're following the best practices of your website. You got your authorship in there, linked to your Google Plus account, and ultimately making sure that your Google ecosystem and your social ecosystem is nice and tight. Well, if you're doing that, it doesn't really matter of the elements of the factors within this engagement that the search engines are looking at least in my opinion, because you're going to be satisfying those needs. Ultimately, they're just looking for the elements that can be measured in the digital world of what human beings really are about, is our beliefs. So it's engagement. Just identify different ways for a particular business can further engage into the online community, primarily Google. If you don't know what the rel equals authorship HTML attribute or markup attribute is, essentially on your website within the HTML code, we can put this little HTML attribute that says this person created this website, or this person owns this website. It's tied into your Google Plus account. When it shows up, when your website listing shows up in the search engine results page, it's going to show you your little image of the picture on the profile for Google. This is a nice thing because it dramatically increases click-through rates. Even in being in the number 2 spot, you get a higher click-through rate than being in the number 1 spot. It also is argued that it's an attribute or a factor that helps improve ranking slightly. But because it's a user-manipulated aspect, it's not really going to be a major factor in ranking, but it does dramatically improve click-through rate. It also improves conversion because it gives authority to a particular website. Now, Google has gone ahead and begun showing and doing this for websites that it can tie together that have not put the actual HTML attribute into it. This tells us that this is something that's going to stick. It's a factor of relevancy. Google wants to show images within their search engine results. But it's still strongly recommended for smaller websites. This would be travel websites that they've been doing this types of stuff. But it's still recommended for smaller websites, local businesses, to include that authorship. We've heard about this before, but next month the Google keyword tool, the public keyword tool, is going to be shut down. It's being replaced by a tool called Keyword Planner. Basically, it means you got to be signed in. You read what you want out of that. Some data. Have you ever heard of Wired magazine? Pretty big magazine, pretty popular. They just did a fantastic little study. Local businesses are saying that across the board, 15.8% of all of their new customers last year came through email marketing, whereas Twitter and Facebook combined racked up 3.2%. This was data that was collected from 72 million customers on 86 different websites. But by far, the #1 way to get more customers, hands down, is organic search. Period. So that's some good, some great things to know. That still, for a local business, the two best ways to get new customers are organic search marketing, and you'll get more customers with organic search marketing, but you'll get a higher return on investment, or you get the highest ROI with email marketing. Period. Email marketing done right. Maybe that should be some discussions next week, because it's far too often done wrong, in my opinion. But in any event, that's going to come to the conclusion of our weekly update and tips. I'm just going to take a quick little 30-second break, and then I'm going to come back and talk about a tip for a local internet marketing agency.